An imprisoned man with a mysterious past sets out on a violent quest for revenge after being suddenly released after 20 years without explanation. It's October 8th, 1993, and we meet this guy, Joe Doucette. He's a top executive, but from the looks of it, he never really got the memo about growing up and maturing. Little wonder his wife left him. The guy is literally taking alcohol at work, slurping it like he's drinking a smoothie or something. And guess what? He thinks it's okay to miss his own daughter's birthday party because she's only 3 years old and couldn't care less if he was there. Well, if I had a father like this, I wouldn't care less either, even if I were 300 years old. Anyway, this evening he has dinner with a potential client, and it's really important that he reels this guy in, or, as his boss told him, he's screwed. Now the thing is, Joe is a salesman, so he does reel the client in. However, he goes and screws up the deal by making a move on his client's partner when he gets up to use the bathroom. When the guy gets back, though, he's not having it, so he lands Joe a sweet, sweet slap on his face for his efforts. No gainsaying he lost the deal, and now he's dead meat. As usual, he resorts to drinking to console himself, but then he's falling down on the streets and retching all over the place. Frankly, it's embarrassing. Later, he finds this Asian woman with a yellow umbrella. For some reason, he walks up to her and shares her umbrella. The next time we see him, he's in his birthday suit and in an unfamiliar place, probably a hotel. By the way, this guy's the most disgusting guy ever. Just spits and retches everywhere he can find. Not to mention that his social graces are non-existent, except he's selling something, obviously. When Joe wakes, he tries to figure out where he is. But there's no phone and the doors are locked, so there's no way for him to communicate with the outside world. His captors are kind, though. They bring him takeouts and, of course, alcohol. But he hates the kind of food they serve him anyway. Shortly after, some gas is released into his room and he passes out. We then see his captors taking stuff from his body. Kinda looks like they were taking his DNA or something. Anyway, in the next scene, Joe hears on the news that his ex-wife was clapped to death in the presence of his 3-year-old. At least, he's human enough to cry about it. For the next several years, Joe is all alone in this tiny room, but his captors still won't tell him why he's been captured. So he resorts to some really worrying behavior that I won't share here because it could be a trigger for you. He even tries to befriend a rat, but his captors kill the rat and serve it to him as dinner. 5 years into his incarceration, he finds out through a television interview that his daughter Mia is now a cello prodigy. He couldn't be more proud, and so he decides to start writing his daughter. Seeing his daughter also gives him new motivation to change his life. So he stops drinking, flushing every vodka he's given down the toilet, and taking the workout videos on his TV seriously, rather than jerking off to them. He also tries to compile a list of people who might have the motivation to want to see him imprisoned. Finally, it's been 20 years and Joe is set to break himself out of his prison come hell or high water. He also takes along with him all the letters he had written for his daughter while locked up. On the day he chooses to break out, though, he sees an interview of his daughter, Mia, on TV, where she says she could try to forgive her father if she ever sees him again. At that moment, Joe's room is sprayed with chloroform, which causes him to pass out. When he wakes, he finds himself in a luxury Louis Vuitton box. He's been shaven clean, got this dapper suit on, a cool pair of sunglasses, some cash, a phone which has a timer on the display, and most importantly, his letters to his daughter. When he climbs out of the box, he sees the woman he met before his abduction. But just as he's about to reach her, he's accosted by these guys on a playing field. Immediately, he swings into action and beats the living crap out of each one of them. In the end, though, he misses the woman and instead meets Elizabeth Olsen, our very own Scarlet Witch, love of all our lives. In this movie, her name is Marie Sebastian. Also, she's a nurse. She offers Joe her help, but Joe refuses, although he does collect her business card. After leaving Marie, he keeps searching for the mystery Asian woman with the yellow umbrella, but he doesn't find her, and so he goes to look for his friend, Chucky. At Chucky's bar, Joe narrates his entire ordeal. In the middle of his narration, he gets a call from a certain invisible man. The guy pretty much just berates him and tells him he'll be in touch. After the call, both men go over Joe's list, trying to see if they can find out anything about the guys on Joe's list of people who might be after him for one reason or the other. It's all dead ends, sadly. And by morning, when Chucky comes to check on him, he finds out that Joe has passed out. But then Chucky looks at his friend's hand and sees Marie's card. Finding out Marie's a nurse, he calls her and she comes around and checks on Joe. As she helps stabilize him, she goes through Joe's letters to his daughter, Mia. Of course, she's deeply moved, but when Joe comes around, he's not excited about it. At first, he wants her out of there, but Marie tells him she believes him and offers to help him find his daughter. Reluctantly, Joe accepts Marie's help, and they make their way to different restaurants with the name Dragon in it to find the restaurant that supplied Joe his food while he was in prison. From one restaurant to the next, Joe tries out different meals to find out which one was in cahoots with his captors. He throws up after each visit, but in one restaurant, the food he takes tastes familiar and he starts to stuff his mouth with the food like a baboon. Bingo. Few minutes after he's had his meal, this big guy dressed in all black walks into the restaurant and picks up a massive order. So he walks into the back of the restaurant, flinging anyone who dared to stand in his way like some speck of dust. He then jacks a bike from this young man and follows the guy who came to pick up the order into some kind of warehouse. Once he gets there, he bursts the eye of the guy he was trailing. I'm not talking about just giving him a black eye. He literally offs this guy with one blow of his hammer. With the guy dead, he takes the delivery into the warehouse, obviously impersonating the guy he just clapped. He then offs a couple more guys. And that's when the boss of the operation, none other than Samuel L. Jackson himself, discovers that it's lunchtime and the captives are not getting fed. While he's still trying to figure out what the heck is going on, Joe walks him, hits him in the jaw, and ties him up. Then he starts to flay the guy's neck with his utility knife and literally adds salt to the injury. It's super disgusting. Obviously unable to take anymore, the boss man, Cheney, reveals that he was only hired by a certain stranger to abduct and keep Joe for 20 years. But that's all he knows. After a while, Cheney's boys come looking for their boss, so Joe releases Cheney, but the boys try to attack him, and so Joe single-handedly gives all of them a beating. But wait, haul up. Workouts are different from fighting classes. How come Joe is locked up for 20 years with nothing but workout and yoga videos, and suddenly he's freaking John Wick? This guy literally claps about 20-something guys coming to attack him. I mean, how? Anyway, he does get stabbed in the back, though. I mean literally. And then once again, with a knife in his back, mind you, he beats the crap out of another set of 20-something guys who come to attack him again. Alright, now this is just ridiculous. Anyway, he makes his way out of the warehouse, after which he collapses outside. But then these strangers pick him up and drive him down to his friend's doorstep before vanishing again. Later that night, Marie comes along with her doctor friend Tom to check on Joe. Tom thinks Joe should be taken to the hospital. But knowing Joe's history, Marie says no. Tom can tell she's getting rather involved with Joe, and he's not comfortable with it. Mostly because he's in love with her. Like, it's so blindingly obvious. And Joe tells her the same thing. But Marie says they're old news, and the topic changes from there. Is there going to be a thing between Marie and Joe? Romantic styles? Dudoy. Anyway, Joe pushes her away, telling her not to come back, which we know is Hollywood speak for, I care about you, but I don't want to hurt you, and I know I will hurt you if you continue to stay around, so go. So shortly after Marie leaves, Joe gets a phone call, and when he tries to call the number back, a phone rings in the bar. And that's how he finds out that his abductor, the stranger, and the Asian woman with the yellow umbrella are in Chucky's bar with him. As usual, his fighter instincts kick in, but he's not prepared for the fighting machine that is the Asian woman. In fact, it turns out she's the stranger's bodyguard. The woman kicks his butt from here to Pluto and back. By the time she's through, he's the definition of black and blue. The stranger tells Joe that he's with his daughter and then makes him an offer. He will give Joe the videotape of himself raping and clapping his wife, $20 million worth of diamonds, and the pleasure of watching him clap himself. But Joe has to answer two questions correctly. One, who is he? And secondly, why did he imprison Joe for 20 years? He has only about 46 hours to do that, else Mr. Stranger is going to off Mia and he gets nothing. To prove that he's not joking, Mr. Stranger gets his goons to show Joe a live broadcast of Marie being held captive. Once Stranger releases Joe, he races to Marie's house only to find Cheney and his boys have Marie prepped like she's roast turkey, waiting to be ravished on Thanksgiving. Inside the house now, Cheney has his boys hold Joe down and prep his neck for flaying just like he did to Cheney back at the warehouse. But just before Cheney can begin, he gets a call from Mr. Stranger, along with a bag of cash. And so Cheney changes his mind. Joe soon gets a call, but it ends before he can take it. It suddenly dawns on him that every time Mr. Stranger calls, the same song plays. Using Shazam, Marie helps him find that the song playing is a theme song of Evergreen Academy. Unfortunately, the school is now closed, but Joe and Marie take a drive down to meet with the headmistress, Miss Edwina Burke. Turns out it was a school Joe once attended. At Burke's house, Marie goes in to speak with the headmistress about Joe, while Joe tries sneaking into Burke's house. While there, Marie pretends to be working with an NGO that fights for wrongly convicted felons to get freedom. As Marie continues to speak to Miss Burke and discover that Joe was a selfish jerk in high school, Joe finds his yearbook and stumbles on a face that looks very much like that of Mr. Stranger. His name? Adrian Doyle Price. After Marie and Joe leave Miss Burke's place, they try to check out the school, but it's locked. So, they decide to come back at night. In the meantime, they check into a motel and try to send Chucky a picture of Adrian to see if he could recognize him. Apparently, Joe, Chucky, and Adrian all went to school together. Shortly after, Marie comes to play nurse and treat his stab wound. Mind you, she's clad in only one itsy bit of towel and fresh from the bath. Of course, the obvious happens, and guess what? Mr. Stranger, who we find out is Adrian, watches every bit of it from his house. Ew, perv. Meanwhile, Chucky finds out something about Adrian and tries to warn Joe about it. Apparently, Adrian had a sister and the whole shebang is about his sister, not Adrian, whatever that means. But Adrian intercepts Chucky's call and deletes his voicemails before Joe can listen to them. In the next scene, Adrian gets into Chucky's bar and strangulates the poor guy to death. Meanwhile, Marie and Joe break into Evergreen Academy. There, they go through Adrian's school records and learn that Adrian had a sister, Amanda. That's when it rushes back to Joe. As we learned before, Joe had always been a jerk from high school, so he used to bully Amanda. No surprise there. However, what he's about to unveil is even more shocking as we learn from Joe's flashback that one night Joe caught Amanda and an older guy having sex in the school's greenhouse. But when we later do some digging, guess what we find? That man was Amanda's father. Of course, Joe tells the whole school because he just has to be an idiot about it. But to be fair, he didn't know the man was Amanda's father at the time. Be that as it may, after the scandal, Amanda's father moved the entire family to Luxembourg, where he murders his wife, his daughter Amanda, and almost murders his son Adrian before offing himself. After their investigation at the school, Joe receives a package. It's from Adrian, and in the box is Chucky's tongue. Marie tries to beg Joe not to go and face Adrian, but Joe is insistent. On his way, he calls a certain Tom Melby, which has zero consequence on the plot, and then receives instructions from Adrian on how to get to him. Meanwhile, his time is running down, but he does get to Adrian's penthouse in time. Once there, he offs Adrian's bodyguard by slitting her throat. He immediately asks Adrian where his daughter is, but Adrian demands his two answers first. Joe explains to Adrian what happened and tries to show him that he didn't know at the time that the man in the greenhouse was his father, but Adrian doesn't seem to be buying that. But then what he reveals next is horrifying to the point of mortifying. Apparently, Adrian's family was a loving family where the father did the devil's tango with everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. Wife, son, and daughter. Crazy thing is, everyone seemed fine with it. In fact, they loved it. Adrian loved it so much, he blames the destruction of his family on Joe. Anyway, Adrian declares that he's won, and now it's time for Joe to receive his prize. Mia, his daughter. While on the way to the supposed room where Mia is being held hostage, Adrian asks Joe why he hadn't bothered to find out why Adrian finally released him. It is then that Adrian reveals that everything Joe thinks he knows about his daughter Mia is just a fabrication. He set everything up. The interview with his daughter, the fact that she's a cello prodigy. Everything is a lie. The so-called Mia he knows from the TV interviews is just a paid actress and musician. By now, Joe is sick of the games. So, he punches the truth out of Adrian. And that's when the SOB reveals that the daughter he's been looking for all along was none other than Marie Sebastian herself, the woman he'd fallen in love with and consequently slept with. Adrian then reveals that this was why he let Joseph go. He wanted Joe to experience what he had shared with his dad, and he wanted to be present in the moment that Joe had that experience. After dealing Joe the final blow, Adrian puts his pistol in his own mouth and pulls the trigger. Shattered beyond belief, Joe writes to Mia, telling her that he had done something unforgivable and that he was bad for her, and that she should forget about him and move on. You know, the whole works. He also gives her some of the diamonds so she can start a new life, while he gives the other half to Cheney to have him locked in that weird motel, apparently for life. With the money and the duck Joe left for her, Marie packs up and moves away from her old house, never finding out that the man she loved was her father. Joe, on the other hand, goes back into his prison, but this time he's his own prisoner. Revenge may be sweet, but holding a grudge for 20 years is just indigestion waiting to happen.